It was a brisk autumn morning at JFK International Airport, and the terminals buzzed with energy. Travelers hurried past each other, dragging suitcases and balancing coffees in one hand while clutching boarding passes in the other. The familiar voices of gate agents echoed over the intercom, announcing boarding calls and flight updates. Among the sea of passengers was Marcus Reynolds, a well-dressed black man in his late 40s, exuding quiet confidence. He wasn't a man who craved attention, but it was hard not to notice him, standing tall in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, carrying a leather briefcase in one hand and a sleek tablet in the other. Marcus looked every bit the seasoned professional he was. This wasn't just any ordinary trip for him. It was a business flight to Los Angeles for one of the most important meetings of his life. Marcus was the CEO of Reynolds Cyber Solutions, a cybersecurity firm that had quickly risen to prominence over the past few years. After years of sleepless nights, relentless hard work, and overcoming countless obstacles, his company was on the verge of securing a multi-million-dollar deal with a group of top-tier investors. But little did Marcus know that this flight wouldn't just be memorable for business. It would become a defining moment in his life for an entirely different reason. As Marcus waited for his boarding group to be called, he took a deep breath, mentally rehearsing his presentation. He had spent weeks perfecting every detail, knowing that this deal could be the key to expanding his business globally. His focus was momentarily interrupted when he noticed a family standing a few feet away. The family consisted of a man and a woman, both in their mid-50s, and their two teenage children. They were dressed impeccably in designer clothing, from the father's expensive-looking tailored blazer to the mother's pristine white cashmere coat. Their children, a boy and a girl, each wore high-end sneakers and carried the latest smartphones in their hands. At first, Marcus didn't pay them much mind. He was used to seeing wealthy families in first class. After all, he had flown enough times to know that people often assumed a certain air of superiority when flying in the front of the plane. However, something about this family's demeanor caught his attention. The father, a man with graying hair and sharp features, kept glancing around the terminal, his expression one of mild irritation, as if he found the entire experience beneath him. His wife, equally well-groomed, whispered something to him, and he responded with a curt nod. Their children, meanwhile, seemed entirely absorbed in their devices, oblivious to their surroundings. When the gate agent finally announced the boarding call for first-class passengers, Marcus calmly gathered his belongings and joined the line. He wasn't in a hurry. He knew that first class offered plenty of space and there was no need to rush. As he approached the gate, he noticed the wealthy family doing the same, though they seemed less patient than he was. "Let's get this over with," the father muttered under his breath as they handed over their boarding passes. Once on the plane, Marcus made his way to seat 1A, a window seat in the front row of the first-class cabin. He placed his briefcase in the overhead compartment and settled into his seat, pulling out his tablet to review his presentation one last time. A few minutes later, the wealthy family entered the cabin, their presence hard to ignore as they approached their seats, which happened to be directly across the aisle from Marcus. The father's expression darkened. He glanced at Marcus, his eyes narrowing slightly before turning to his wife. "Are you kidding me?" the man whispered harshly to his wife. "We're sitting next to him?" His wife looked toward Marcus briefly before replying in a low voice. "It's just a few hours. Let's not make a scene." Their hushed conversation didn't escape Marcus's notice, but he chose to ignore it. He was no stranger to prejudice, and he had long since learned to rise above it. However, the tension in the air was palpable, and it didn't take long for things to escalate. As the family settled into their seats, the father couldn't seem to let it go. He called over a flight attendant, a young woman named Clara, who approached with a professional smile. "Is there something I can assist you with, sir?" Clara asked. "Yes," the man said curtly, lowering his voice but keeping a sharp tone. "We were hoping to sit somewhere else. We'd prefer not to be seated here." Clara blinked, momentarily taken aback by the request. "I'm sorry, sir, but first class is fully booked. All passengers have been assigned their seats." The man frowned, clearly dissatisfied. "Are you sure? There must be something you can do. We paid a lot of money for these seats." and I'd expect a bit more accommodation. I understand, sir, but there's nothing available at the moment. If anything changes, I'll be sure to let you know. Clara replied politely before walking away. Marcus kept his focus on his tablet, pretending not to hear the exchange. Though he couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. He had worked hard to be where he was. Yet there were still people who saw only his skin color, not his accomplishments. As the plane took off, the tension remained thick. The wealthy father continued to glance at Marcus periodically, his displeasure evident. His wife occasionally whispered something to him, likely urging him to drop the matter. But the atmosphere was already strained. Meanwhile, Marcus focused on his work, determined not to let the situation distract him. He knew that how he reacted in moments like these mattered, not just for himself, but for those who might look up to him. An hour into the flight, the plane hit a patch of turbulence. Clara, ever attentive, made her rounds to ensure that all passengers were comfortable. When she reached Marcus's row, she noticed his tablet screen displaying complex data and graphs. "Excuse me, sir," she said with genuine curiosity. "Are you in finance or tech?" Marcus offered a polite smile. "Tech cybersecurity. To be specific." Clara's eyes lit up with interest. "That's fascinating. My brother works in IT. He's always talking about how cybersecurity is the future." Marcus nodded. "It's definitely a growing field. We're working on some exciting projects right now." Actually, their conversation, though brief, caught the attention of the wealthy father, who couldn't help but eavesdrop. He exchanged a glance with his wife, who raised an eyebrow, clearly curious about what they were hearing. Unable to contain his curiosity any longer, the man leaned slightly forward. "Did I hear correctly? You're in cybersecurity?" Marcus turned to face him, maintaining his polite demeanor. "Yes, I run a company called Reynolds Cyber Solutions. We specialize in developing advanced cybersecurity systems for corporations and government agencies." The man's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Reynolds Cyber Solutions? I've heard of that. You were featured in Forbes last month, weren't you?" Marcus nodded. "That's correct. We've been fortunate to gain some attention recently." Suddenly, the man's entire demeanor changed. Gone was the haughty arrogance, replaced by something resembling respect, or perhaps embarrassment. He realized that the man he had judged so harshly was, in fact, a highly successful CEO. As the plane neared its destination, the man hesitated before finally speaking. "Mr. Reynolds, I just wanted to say, I apologize if we made you uncomfortable earlier. It was uncalled for." Marcus met his gaze. Apology accepted. The wealthy couple had learned a valuable lesson that day, one they wouldn't soon forget. Marcus didn't look back. He had no need to. He knew who he was, and no amount of prejudice or judgment could change that.